There is a question most men over 40 have already asked themselves, not out loud, quietly. In a car on a Tuesday evening, or in a bathroom mirror before the house wakes up, or in a meeting where you realized, somewhere between the second and third agenda item, that you had stopped fully showing up. The question is not, what happened to my life? The question is simpler than that, and harder. Why am I getting smaller? Most men don't call it that. They call it being realistic. They call it priorities. They call it just how it is, after a certain age. But there is a more precise word for what is happening, and once you have it, you cannot unsee it. By the end of this video, you will understand the 3 root causes Marcus Aurelius identified for why men contract in the second half of life. You will have his 3 daily practices to reverse it, and you will understand the one fundamental shift that makes the rest permanent. Not motivation, a diagnosis, and a method. Let's name what is actually happening. Because most men who are shrinking don't experience it as a single event. It doesn't arrive like a crisis. It arrives like weather. Gradual, cumulative. And by the time you notice the temperature has dropped, you have already adjusted. Shrinking takes 3 forms. The first is external. The ambitions you had at 32 or 35 quietly archived. Not abandoned, that would require a decision. Archived. Moved to the back of the drawer where you don't have to look at them, where they don't accuse you every morning. The second form is relational, becoming invisible in your own life. Present at the dinner table. Absent from the room. The man who provides, organizes, shows up, but who stopped leading the conversation. Who is there, in every practical sense, but not truly seen. Not even by himself. The third form is the most dangerous, because it is the most silent. Internal shrinking. The private conversation going quiet. The voice that used to challenge you, that used to ask more of you, has become easier to ignore. Not because it has nothing to say, because you have become skilled at not listening. This is the real loss. Not the career plateau, not the body that takes longer to recover, not the distance that has grown between who you are now and who you intended to be. The real loss is the silence inside. And it happens the same way in almost every man, through accumulated responsibility, through accumulated disappointment, through the quiet cultural agreement, never spoken aloud, that middle age is decline. That this is simply what happens. The Stoics had a different view entirely. Marcus Aurelius did not write the Meditations as a young man finding his way. He wrote them between the ages of 40 and 58. On military campaign. Under the weight of an empire in crisis. Dealing with plague, with war, with the particular loneliness of a man whose authority meant almost no one around him would tell him the truth. These were not the notes of a man in his prime. They were the notes of a man who had accumulated exactly the losses and responsibilities you have, and chose daily to think carefully about how he would respond to them. Seneca wrote his most important philosophical letters, the ones that are still read today, after the age of 60. Epictetus taught until the day he died. A former slave, a man who had experienced the most complete form of external powerlessness imaginable, and who became the most quoted philosopher in the ancient world. These were not young men. The Stoic understanding of the second half of a man's life is not decline. It is the removal of illusion. Youth has energy and ambition, but it also has noise, the noise of ego, the noise of approval seeking, the noise of thinking you know more than you do. Loss strips that away. Experience teaches what youth cannot. The man who has survived 45 years of living, intact enough to be asking these questions, has something the young man does not. Depth. Raw. Usable, expandable depth. That is not decline. That is raw material. So why do men shrink? Not because of weakness. The Stoics were precise about this. Weakness is not the cause. The cause is structural. 3 specific patterns, each one diagnosable, each one reversible. If you recognize yourself in any of them, that is not a verdict. That is a direction. Root cause 1. Outsourced identity. When your sense of worth is entirely carried by your job, your title, your role as provider, your place in a relationship, then any threat to those things becomes a threat to your existence. You cannot expand when your foundation is outside you. Epictetus was direct about this. He said, "What belongs to others can be taken by others. What is internal to you cannot." The man who has built his identity entirely on things that can be removed, his position, his salary, the respect of a specific person, has placed his entire psychological structure on unstable ground. When those things shift, and they always shift, the man shifts with them. Root cause 2. Comfort as default. Not dramatic failure. Not collapse. The slow, invisible daily preference for ease over difficulty. The Stoics called this the death of virtue, not the dramatic fall. The quiet, accumulated choice, each one small, each one reasonable on its own, to take the path that requires less. The meeting where you don't say the thing you actually think. The conversation you postpone because the timing isn't right. The morning traded for 30 more minutes of sleep. The ambition quietly reclassified as unrealistic. Each one, nothing. Together, the architecture of a smaller life. Root cause 3. Approval dependence. Shrinking to fit. To what the room expects of you. To what your family picture seems to require. To what feels safe, predictable, unlikely to cause friction. Epictetus called this living as a slave, not to a person, to a crowd, to the accumulated, unexamined expectations of people who have not thought nearly as carefully about your life as you have. When you shrink to avoid disapproval, you are not being careful. You are outsourcing your life. If you see yourself in one of these, good. That is where the method begins. Marcus Aurelius did not theorize about expansion. He practiced it every day, in writing, under the conditions he actually had, not the conditions he would have preferred. 3 daily practices. Concrete. Applicable today. Practice 1. The morning audit. Before the day claims you, you claim the day. 1 question. Not, what do I need to get done today? Not, what does the calendar require of me? Who am I choosing to be today? The man at 45 who feels stuck does not need a better to-do list. He does not need more productivity. He needs a daily, deliberate decision about character. This is it. It takes 2 minutes. It requires nothing except the willingness to ask the question before the noise begins. Who am I choosing to be today? Practice 2. The obstacle reframe. Marcus wrote it plainly, and it is probably the most practical sentence in Stoic philosophy. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is not a motivational phrase. It is a precise instruction for how to relate to difficulty. When the meeting goes badly, that is the material. When the relationship is strained, that is the material. When the ambition is blocked, or the door closes, or the recognition doesn't come, that is the direction. The difficulty is not interrupting your life. It is asking something of you. The man who makes this reframe does not wait for circumstances to improve before he begins. He finds the expansion inside the obstacle. Practice 3. The evening review. At the end of each day, before sleep, Marcus asked 3 questions. What did I intend today? What did I actually do? What will I do differently tomorrow? Not self-punishment, not self-criticism. Precise, honest, brief accounting. Because a man who measures nothing changes nothing. And a man who measures the right things, with patience and consistency, changes everything. These 3 practices, done together, do not require a personality change. They require perhaps 10 minutes, morning and evening. That is the method. Everything we have covered, the 3 root causes, the 3 practices, all of it rests on one fundamental shift. And without this shift, the practices become another thing you do for a while, and then quietly stop. The Stoics made a precise distinction between what they called preferred indifference and virtuous action. Preferred indifference are the outcomes: career success, money, status, the respect of people whose opinion matters to you, the recognition you have been working toward. These things are not bad. You are permitted to want them. But they are outside your control. They always have been. And when you make them the primary measure of your worth, you hand the verdict on your own life to forces that were never reliable. Virtuous action is different. It is not an outcome. It is the quality of your response to whatever you are facing. Did I act with clarity today? Did I act with the courage the moment required? Did I respond with the integrity of the man I have decided to be? That is inside your control. That cannot be removed. That cannot be diminished by a bad quarter, or a difficult relationship, or a door that didn't open. A man who makes this shift, truly makes it, cannot shrink. Because he has nothing left to shrink from. He is no longer measuring himself by outcomes that fluctuate. He is measuring himself by something that only he can control. Something that, the older he becomes, the more deliberately he can choose. This is not resignation. This is not giving up on outcomes, or ambition, or wanting things to go well. It is understanding which measurement actually tells you something true about who you are. You are not past your prime. The Stoics never had a category for past prime. They had one category: the man who acts with virtue, today, in exactly the circumstances he has. The question you have been pushing down, the quiet one, the one that arrives in a car park at 7 in the evening, or across a table, or in a meeting where you have stopped being fully present. That question is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of depth. It is asking you to stop archiving your ambitions. It is asking you to stop shrinking to fit. It is asking you to measure yourself by something that cannot be taken. The Stoics would not tell you to feel better about where you are. They would ask you what you are going to do today with the man you have become. And they would expect a considered answer. If this is the kind of thinking you want more of, subscribe to Modern Stoic Wisdom. Every week, a deep dive built specifically for men navigating the second half of life. Not motivation, not quick fixes. The real thing,